whispered close Mike. Are you awake? Welcome to the deep dive. Just take a look around you for a second. The lights are probably low, the house is quiet. It's that time of night when everything just holds its breath.
It's the moment when the defenses come down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And things start to feel a little, I don't know, thin. Like the barrier between your conscious thinking self and whatever it is that's really running the show, it just starts to dissolve.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about.
Right. Tonight, we are not interested in the nightmares you have after you're already asleep. We are going right to the edge, to that precise, frankly, terrifying liminal space of the falling.
That gray zone, the transition of consciousness that we all just, voluntarily enter every single night.
And our source material for this is, it's something else.
It is. We've spent weeks going through a very dense and I have to say deeply unsettling body of work. It's a confidential set of research notes, almost a dossier, really.
A dossier, I like that.
And it catalogs the biological anomalies of what's called the hypnagogic state and sleep paralysis.
So our mission tonight is to really dissect that moment of drifting off, to get past the simple, you get sleepy and you fall asleep idea.
We want to understand the psychological, maybe even the existential terror of the exact moment you lose control. Because it's a moment that this research suggests is far more violent and far stranger than most people realize.
And I have to be honest with you, this topic genuinely terrifies me. I am that person who fights sleep. I will stay awake until I'm about to collapse.
Why is that?
Because I hate that moment, the fall. That instant where you feel like you trip or you jolt and you just lose yourself. For me, it feels less like rest and more like being pulled down violently, against your will.
And we're going to find out why that is.
We're going to find out what is actually happening in that brief, terrifying window. Why does our body react like we've just been, pushed off a cliff?
We're going to dive into the architecture of consciousness itself, using the findings from this report to really dissect the biological terror of drifting off. What we found suggests it is not a soft landing. It's a violent system termination, so get comfortable, but maybe keep a light on.
Okay, so let's jump right into the deep end here. This first concept is, I think, the one that grounds this entire deep dive, and it's really unsettling. It's called the mini-death hypothesis.
Right. And it completely upends the common understanding of sleep.
Yeah, because we all think of it as this gentle fade out, like you're slowly turning a dimmer switch down until the room is dark. It feels like a smooth, continuous thing.
But the report we've been studying argues for something radically different, something much more final. It says sleep isn't a gradual process. It is a radical, instantaneous state change.
Just state change.
Yeah.
Like water to ice. Not a slow cooling, but a sudden freeze.
That's a perfect analogy, and it's absolutely critical to understanding the science here. Neuroscience is moving away from that simple idea of a continuum.
So it's not a fade.
It's not a fade. It's a moment of severe biological severance. If you actually look at the brain activity, the electrical coherence across the big neural networks, it breaks down rapidly.
And this is driven by chemicals.
It's chemically and electrically driven, yes, and it is very, very quick.
Okay, so how quick are we talking? Where is that point of no return?
The notes pinpoint a very precise neurological moment. It's a small, critical window where the brain enters what is formally called the hypnagogic state.
Hypnagogic.
And the research focuses intensely on what they call the 3-second gap.
3 seconds.
3 seconds. That's the peak point of instability, the briefest of transitions where the brain's regulatory centers they lose their grip before the next state can take over.
That's all the time we get. 3 seconds to cross this chasm from being awake to being switched off.
That's the period of peak ambiguity, the true gray zone. And what's fascinating is what the research claims is happening during those 3,000 milliseconds.
Which is what?
The report suggests that during this gap, the very laws of physics and identity dissolve.
Okay, that's a huge statement. What does that even mean?
It means the brain loses its coherence filter. It's not just that you're drowsy, it's that the entire mechanism that organizes and defines you, your sense of self, your awareness of space, of linear time, it stops playing by the rules of waking reality.
It's like the brain's operating system crashes for a second.
Exactly. It's running for a moment without an OS just before it loads the sleep program.
That sounds incredibly dramatic, but we have to get specific here. What does dissolved identity actually mean in a biological sense? Let's get to the core of this consciousness-severed hypothesis.
Okay, so we need to talk about the neural networks that create your awareness. Waking consciousness relies on continuous, synchronous firing of neurons, especially in the frontal and parietal lobes, the central executive network.
The part that's you. The part that's listening and thinking right now.
That's the one. To start the sleep process, the brain has to aggressively suppress that activity. This is done with neurotransmitters like GABA, and also critically, the buildup of a chemical called adenosine throughout the day.
Right. Adenosine is what makes you feel sleepy.
It is. And when the level of it hits a certain threshold, the suppression is rapid. So the core hypothesis is this, that suppression means the continuity of self breaks.
The stream of consciousness just stops. It's not paused, it's stopped.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We like to think of our consciousness as a single, unbroken film reel, running from the moment we wake up until we go to sleep.
Yeah.
But this research suggests that continuity is an illusion. It's something our memory centers create in retrospect to make a coherent story.
So when the brain executes this radical state change, that 3-second gap,
the entire active flow of awareness is interrupted. The previous stream of consciousness, the you who was just listening to this deep dive, the you who was thinking about your day, that specific active instance of consciousness is, for all intents and purposes, terminated.
I find that almost impossible to wrap my head around. If it's terminated, then who wakes up in the morning? How do I still know who I am? How does that new consciousness just pick up the thread?
And that is the central philosophical challenge, and the report actually addresses it head-on. Biologically, yes, you're the same person. Your memories, your personality, your brain structure, all that stored data, it's all still there in the long-term archives. But the stream of consciousness that begins the next morning is defined as a new instance. It's starting from scratch, just using the saved data. The hardware is the same, but the program that's actively running is newly loaded.
So the chilling implication here, which is raised directly in these research notes, is that technically, you die every night.
That is the conclusion. The specific conscious self that was active before you entered hypnagogia never comes back.
It's a complete termination and reboot.
Of the active operating system, yes. And this is achieved through the sudden shutdown of what are called the thalamocortical loops. Those are the main relay stations that filter all the sensory data and give us a cohesive sense of reality. When they go offline, the world and your sense of self inside it fragments. That's the dissolution the report describes.
It makes going to sleep feel less like resting and more like a willful leap into non-existence. Knowing that something similar, but not identical, is going to wake up tomorrow and just claim my history as its own. It's a surrender.
And that surrender, that termination of the active self, is exactly what the body fights against.
Let's use that analogy you mentioned, the computer analogy.
Right. For you listening right now, imagine your consciousness is this complex piece of software, the operating system, running on the computer that is your brain.
Okay.
All day, that OS is running millions of processes. When you go to sleep, the system doesn't just enter low power mode or standby. That would imply it's still running.
The full shutdown.
It's a clean, definitive shutdown. The hardware, the brain's structure stays the same, but the active software process is terminated. It gets restarted fresh every 24 hours.
And that 3-second gap.
That's the moment the OS is completely shut down, but the BIOS, the primitive core survival functions, is still active. And that BIOS is about to panic.
That system panic is exactly what we feel next. The body, perceiving this existential shutdown, decides it's time to intervene.
In a very big way.
Speaking of the body being aware of this threat, this brings us to the phenomenon that I personally dread the most. The one that makes me fight to stay awake just a little bit longer. The hypnic jerk.
Ah, yes.
That sudden violent feeling of tripping or falling off a ledge, or sometimes it's just this massive full-body spasm that jolts you completely awake, just when you think you've finally made it past that 3-second gap and into the dark.
This is probably the most visceral, the most universal experience of falling asleep, and the research notes reveal it's anything but a random muscle twitch.
It's not random.
Not at all. This jolt, scientifically called a hypnagogic jerk, is in fact a desperate and massive survival mechanism. It is a profound physiological scream.
A survival mechanism against what, though? Against the darkness.
Yeah.
Against losing that active self we just talked about.
Precisely. It is a defense mechanism against the perceived imminent death that we just discussed.
Okay, so let's get into the deep mechanics of this. How does it work?
To understand it, you have to understand what the body is trying to do. It's attempting to enter a state called atonia.
Atonia.
It's a complete functional muscle paralysis. It's absolutely necessary to keep us from, physically acting out our dreams later on. It's a critical safety feature that's initiated by the brainstem.
Yeah.
But The primitive part of our brain, the deep, ancient systems responsible for fight or flight, specifically the amygdala and some other bits in the brainstem, they are not concerned with your safety later on in a dream.
They only care about right now.
They are purely focused on immediate, moment-to-moment survival.
So the amygdala, the so-called lizard brain that handles fear and panic, it sees the body starting this paralysis process. How does it interpret that?
It misinterprets it catastrophically.
How so?
As the brainstem sends signals down the spinal cord to inhibit your motor function, the amygdala is watching this rapid systemic loss of muscle control, and it perceives only one thing: failure. A total rapid loss of command over the body.
It doesn't see it as a controlled shutdown for rest.
It sees it as a crisis state. The brain thinks, based on its most ancient, primitive programming, that you are either undergoing a fatal collapse or ancestrally, that you have physically fallen out of a safe location, like falling out of a tree or off a cliff edge.
The classic free fall scenario. It thinks we're falling, so it's trying to wake up the muscles to catch ourselves.
And that perceived threat demands instant, non-negotiable corrective action. So to counteract this fatal free fall or systemic shutdown, this mini death, the amygdala reacts violently.
How violent?
It overrides all the sleep initiation signals and sends out a massive, non-specific electrical discharge. It's a neurochemical lightning strike, a powerful shock that goes straight to the reticular formation and then out to the motor neurons of the entire body.
A massive electrical jolt. That explains why it feels like a literal shock wave moving through you. It's intense enough to actually make your limbs kick out.
It's designed to be overwhelmingly intense. It's a full system reboot attempt. The most crucial insight from these research notes is that this jolt is explicitly a survival reflex fighting against the process of sleep.
Fighting sleep itself.
It is designed to revive you from what the brain genuinely perceives as dangerous free fall or imminent death. The speed of that sensory input loss is so high that the panic button gets pushed before your higher brain, the cortex, can even rationalize what's happening.
But are there any other theories? Because sometimes, for me, the jerk feels less a full-on fall and more like a static pop.
That's a great point, and the report does highlight two other, maybe complementary theories.
Okay.
The first one suggests it's what's called a proprioceptive mismatch. Basically an error in how your brain is sensing your body's position in space.
So it gets confused.
Exactly. When the brain starts losing its external sensory anchors site, it gets confused about where your limbs are. The sensory feedback becomes unreliable and starts firing randomly, making the brain think your body is suddenly moving, even when it's perfectly still.
So in that case, the jerk isn't the body trying to catch itself from a fall. It's the body reacting to a phantom movement signal that the brain just made up.
That's the idea. And the second theory is a bit simpler. It's about the noise of the system shutting down.
Like an old TV turning off?
A perfect analogy. As the brainstem actively suppresses the motor neurons, sometimes those neurons fire one last big, uncontrolled burst all at once before they go silent. Think of an old appliance making a loud thunk just before it powers down.
The hypnic jerk could just be the nervous system's version of a massive final thunk.
It could be.
But regardless of the specific reason, if we connect this all back to the mini-death hypothesis, the hypnic jerk is the strongest, most violent biological proof we have that the brain sees falling asleep as a profound threat.
Absolutely.
It's literally screaming, "Wake up," where you're losing command of the system.
It's an internal battle waged every single night. And if the jolt fails, or if you manage to overcome that sudden terror and drift back down, well, that's when the brain finally stops fighting and the sensory chaos truly begins.
So we've lost the fight. The amygdala's panic jolt didn't work. The system is terminated, and now this new operating system is trying to boot up in the dark.
And this is where the internal maintenance starts, and we begin to get these really strange sensory inputs. They feel less like biology and more like a glitch in the simulation.
Totally. Once you move deeper into hypnagogia, the filters that organize reality, those thalamocortical loops we mentioned, they're suppressed. The sensory processing centers of the brain start to behave very, very strangely without any external input.
They become autonomous. They start doing their own thing.
And this is where we get something called the Tetris effect, and also what some researchers call prisoner's cinema. And this is all about the visual cortex, right?
That's correct. And the mechanism behind it is a powerful example of the brain's constant need to process data.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. Your visual cortex has been bombarded all day with trillions of bits of complex information. Light, motion, shapes, colors. Then suddenly, you close your eyes, it gets nothing.
The input is just gone.
This sudden stop of external stimuli is called deferentation, and it causes the cortex to act erratically. It doesn't just rest. It essentially dumps the cache. It starts processing and ejecting all the residual data, the repetitive patterns, the emotional stuff it was just handling.
So those fleeting images I see right before I drift off, they aren't random dreams. They're literally the brain cleaning out its short-term memory of the most repetitive or intense visual things from the day.
That's exactly what it is. And the things people report seeing are fascinatingly consistent, almost funny, until you realize it's your brain running wild. People report seeing geometric fractals, these highly complex, repeating patterns that look almost mathematically perfect.
I've seen those.
Or, more disturbingly, faces. These faces are often nonspecific, almost like generic masks, and they flash by really quickly. This is the visual cortex just processing the concept of face without any real ones to look at.
And you mentioned some really specific examples from the source material, especially ones tied to, like, modern life.
Yes, we have a lot of documentation on this. The Tetris example is the most famous one. People who play the game for hours report vividly seeing the blocks continuing to fall and stack behind their eyelids, even when they're lying still in a dark room.
The brain is just continuing the pattern.
It is. But we also have reports from professional tasks. Accountants seeing endless columns of numbers flashing by, software developers seeing lines of code scrolling past, and for people who work in really intense visual jobs like long-haul truck drivers,
What do they see?
they report vivid visions of the road lines zooming past them or the specific texture of the asphalt, even when they're stationary in a motel bed. The brain is just spitting out the most persistent, residual, visual information it processed that day. It's recycling data.
Okay, so the visual system becomes this very unstable, chaotic place in the gray zone. But if the visual cortex is just recycling, the auditory experience can be much more violent.
Much more.
We need to spend some serious time on exploding head syndrome, because that name alone sounds like it belongs in this deep dive.
Exploding head syndrome, or EHS, is a type of parasomnia. And while it's physically harmless, the psychological terror it generates is acute.
And when does it happen?
It happens right at that precise moment of sleep onset, the exact transition point. And it's often accompanied by a flash of light, which reinforces this idea of a massive electrical error in the brain.
So what does it sound like specifically? Is it just a loud noise, or is there a certain quality to it that makes it so terrifying?
The sound isn't just loud, it's deafening. It's immediate and completely overwhelming. Subjects in the studies report hearing a whole range of sounds. A bomb blast, a sudden gunshot, a thunderous crack, a shattering cymbal crash, all experienced at maximum volume.
And it's a sharp sound.
Very sharp. A percussive sound with no echo, no resonance. It's an auditory shockwave.
And the most crucial element, the thing that separates it from a real sound in your room, is the location.
That is absolutely crucial. You are not hearing something in the room. The noise originates inside the subject's skull.
Inside your head.
It feels localized directly to your head, and it often induces intense physical symptoms. Your heart rate skyrockets, you get an immediate adrenaline surge. The working theory detailed in the report is that this is caused by a massive, synchronous burst of activity in the auditory neurons of the brainstem.
But why would the auditory system just fire like that, right at shutdown?
It seems to connect back to the general instability of the system during this transition. As the brainstem's reticular formation starts the paralysis of the body, it's systematically shutting down all these different neuronal groups.
Right.
Well, the researchers hypothesized that the bundle of neurons responsible for processing sounds sometimes fires late and all at once, just as they're about to be shut down. It's that old appliance analogy again. Imagine trying to power down a huge bank of audio amplifiers all at once. Sometimes one of them makes a giant final pop before it goes silent.
So EHS is the brain misfiring its audio centers at the exact moment of systemic disconnection. It's the ultimate hard stop sound effect for your consciousness shutting down.
That's the theory.
So the transition is marked by geometric chaos in our vision, a data dump, and for some people, the sound of a grenade going off inside their own head. This is clearly an extremely unstable state.
Very.
And if that process of atonia, the muscle paralysis, if it isn't perfectly coordinated with falling asleep, or if your consciousness restarts too early, that's when we enter the true nightmare scenario, the one that has plagued humanity for millennia.
That's when you meet the intruder.
The ultimate horror. And the primary reason why so many cultures historically have attributed this experience to demons or succubi or malevolent night hags? Sleep paralysis.
We've established that atonia, the chemical muscle paralysis, is necessary for safe sleep.
Right.
Sleep paralysis is often described by research as a catastrophic failure of timing. The body has successfully initiated atonia, the spinal motor neurons are inhibited, the body is chemically paralyzed, locked down like you've been given an anesthetic, but the brain, specifically your conscious awareness, your prefrontal cortex, it wakes up prematurely. The mind is fully alert, you can think rationally, you're totally aware of your surroundings, but the physical self is completely locked down, utterly immobile.
It's a waking nightmare. The user interface is active, but the controls are disabled.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And that feeling of absolute conscious helplessness. It's just primal terror. You know you need to move, you try to scream, but no sound comes out, no muscles respond. But the real terror, the reason this became a staple of horror mythology around the world, is what happens next.
The hypnagogic hallucination.
We have to focus heavily on the shadow man.
This is, without a doubt, the most consistent, the most pervasive, and the most frightening piece of psychological data in all the research we looked at.
Okay.
The hallucination of a malevolent presence, often dark or vaguely defined, known universally as the shadow man.
And I have to push on this. This is the critical question that comes up over and over in the historical parts of the research, and this is where it starts to sound conspiratorial. Almost. Supernatural. Go on. Why does everyone across all human cultures, across all of history, see the same shadow? A dark shadow figure, typically male, often seen standing in the corner of the room, or even more terrifyingly, sitting directly on your chest, exerting this crushing pressure. If this is just a random neurological misfire, why the uniformity? Why this specific iconography of a menacing intruder?
It's almost archetypal.
It feels like a fundamental shared horror archetype that's just embedded in our collective consciousness.
The uniformity is genuinely astonishing, and it's the primary reason for so much intense research in this area. Whether you call it the old hag in Newfoundland, or Kanashibari tied by iron in Japan, or the pest in Slavic cultures, the core elements are always the same. Paralysis, plus the feeling of an oppressive external threat.
So what's the scientific explanation, the one the dossier tries to standardize?
It's cold, it's detached, but it's also terrifyingly elegant. This figure, the shadow man, is a direct projection of the brain's own highly active threat detection system.
A projection? But why invent a threatening human shape? Why not just have a feeling of panic?
Because the subject is awake. You're completely alert, but you are entirely unable to issue a motor command or move a single muscle. And this stateful consciousness, combined with physical imprisonment, is fundamentally inexplicable to the brain's higher rational centers.
It's a paradox it can't solve.
Exactly. The brain's core function is to maintain control, interpret reality, and keep you safe. When it senses a total loss of motor control, a state that is completely contrary to survival, it has to rationalize the crisis immediately. It cannot accept the input. I am paralyzed for no reason, and I am in danger. That's a breakdown of logic.
So to impose order on that chaos, to create a reason for the physical inability to move, it invents an external, tangible cause.
Precisely. The brain needs a reason for the paralysis. It must invent an external, immediate danger, an intruder, a monster, a demonic presence, to explain why you can't move. The experience of the paralysis is rationalized as being physically pinned down or restrained by an outside entity.
So that feeling of a crushing weight on your chest.
That is your brain trying to process the intense but non-functional signals coming from your respiratory and limb muscles. It interprets their immobility as being physically held down.
The shadow man, then, is the brain's ultimate attempt to build a coherent, even if it's terrifying, narrative around its own internal chemical lockdown. It's the logical explanation for a completely illogical state.
And that also explains the universality of the shadow part. Why isn't it a pink unicorn or a detailed monster?
Why not?
Because your visual cortex is still mostly offline, as we discussed in the sensory anomalies section. It can't generate the highly detailed, brightly colored images of a full-blown dream. So it projects a generalized, universally threatening, amorphous, dark shape into your environment. It is the most economical and effective manifestation of pure threat that the system can create with its limited resources.
It's the physical embodiment of the sentence, I can't move because something is here.
Correct.
But what about the feeling of malevolence? The research knows that people don't just see a figure, they feel it wishes them harm. Is that a projection too?
Absolutely. The perception of malevolence is driven by the amygdala. Remember the amygdala. It failed to stop the mini-death with the hypnic jerk, and now it is on high alert because of the paralysis. The shadow man is an amygdala-driven hallucination.
So because the body is in a state of extreme perceived danger.
The hallucinated presence must be, by definition, evil, menacing, intent on harm. It's a mechanism to ensure the subject remains hypervigilant until the atonia finally breaks. The shadow man is terrifying, but he is fundamentally your brain trying to save you from itself.
To think that the most persistent demon of human folklore is actually our own deeply confused, hypervigilant survival mechanism, it really makes the moment of falling asleep feel like you're entering a battleground.
In many ways you are.
Okay, we have covered the existential termination, the body's violent resistance, the sensory chaos of the cortex, and the psychological projection of the shadow man. Now we get to the final, and maybe the most philosophically chilling anomaly documented in this research.
The manipulation of time itself.
Leading directly to something called chronophobia.
If the mini-death hypothesis strips away your sense of a continuous self, and the shadow man strips away your security in the physical world, the time dilation anomaly strips away your confidence in reality itself.
How so?
When we enter the dream state, our subjective perception of time changes drastically. This is because we lose all our external temporal anchors. No clocks, no sun, nothing.
We've all had those dreams, right? The ones that feel incredibly long, where entire adventures, complex stories, profound emotional journeys play out, and then you wake up and realize only a few minutes have passed.
That instantaneous realization that everything you just experienced was a manufactured timeline, that's the core of the dilemma, and the source material actually tries to quantify this distortion.
What does this say?
It provides a staggering metric based on correlating REM sleep duration with what people report from their dreams. It suggests that 5 minutes of real-world time can subjectively feel like 50 years within a deeply immersive dream state.
50 years. In 5 minutes.
The brain, operating at some unknown internal clock speed, is capable of constructing an immense, detailed, seemingly logical timeline and history in what is, objectively, a flash.
But what's happening neurologically that allows for that hyperprocessing?
It seems to be tied to the decoupling of the prefrontal cortex from the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the brain's main center for memory and for time-stamping events.
Okay.
In waking life, the hippocampus is constantly checking our experiences against a linear timeline. But in REM sleep and hypnagogia, that linear check is disabled. The brain starts generating massive amounts of data sensory input, emotional responses, complex narratives, without having to wait for real-world limitations or physics.
So all the processing power that's normally used to just maintain our awareness of the physical world is redirected.
It's all redirected into creating a subjective reality. A 5-minute dream might contain the data equivalent of months of manufactured experience, which is then lived through instantly by the sleeping consciousness.
So, if the brain can manufacture a lifetime in 5 minutes, then the boundaries between what is real experience and what is manufactured reality become terrifyingly blurred when you wake up. How do I know that this deep dive, this conversation, wasn't just a 30-second loop my brain ran 5 minutes ago?
And that is where the risk and the implication truly hit home. This leads directly to chronophobia, not just the fear of time passing, but the fear of its fundamental unreliability. If your brain can construct an entire subjective reality that lasts for decades while the clock on the wall only ticks forward a few minutes, how can you ever trust the duration of any experience?
The research mentions disorientation from this, right?
It does. This is why these profound time dilation dreams often lead to a lingering disorientation when you wake up. The subject struggles, just for a moment, to reconcile their objective, real-world age with their subjective dream age.
Your own brain becomes the ultimate unreliable narrator. If it can create a detailed memory of a 20-year marriage in a matter of minutes, then the stability of my waking life, this conversation, the room I'm in, it's all based on an assumption of linear time that my brain is demonstrably willing to shatter every single night.
And this feeds directly into the ultimate provocative question that the research notes leave us with, the one we promised we would bring to you.
Which is?
If the brain can construct an entire lifetime of experience in a matter of minutes, how can you truly know if you are awake right now? There is no biological filter that confirms linearity. There is only memory that suggests it.
Wow. So this deep dive, this whole journey into the transition state, it concludes on that note of fundamental uncertainty.
It does.
It summarizes the entire terrifying process. The voluntary surrender to sleep involves a brief, terrifying death of your current consciousness, which is fought vehemently by violent electrical shocks from your primitive brain.
If you survive that fight, you pass into a realm marked by geometric visual errors and internal bomb blasts.
And if you happen to restart too soon, You encounter the projection of a universal shadow monster that's designed to rationalize your own paralysis.
All of which culminates in a psychological time warp that introduces a fundamental uncertainty about the very nature of reality itself.
The transition to sleep is revealed not as this peaceful retreat, but as a violent, existential boundary crossing.
Orchestrated by the oldest, most panicked parts of our own biology. It's a nightly confrontation with the fragility of our own identity.
So we've walked through the entire cycle of falling, the brief mini-death, and the terrifying severing of self, the violent survival reflex of the hypnic jerk trying to save us from that death, the chaotic glitching of the visual and auditory systems, and finally the universal intruder we project onto ourselves during paralysis.
It's a sobering realization, isn't it? That the most passive act of our day, going to sleep, is orchestrated by such raw, primitive, and often chaotic neurological mechanisms.
The quiet dark is really an internal battleground. The body is fighting for control while the mind is just trying to navigate an invented reality.
That's a good way to put it.
It certainly makes me think twice about turning the lights out and just embracing the fall. You now have the full rundown of what happens in that crucial 3-second window and all the chaos that follows.
Everything you thought you knew about peace and rest.
It's all just complex biological rationalization, covering up instability and existential threat. Tonight, as you feel that drowsiness creeping in, as you feel that distinct sense of a gravitational pull, that moment of slipping away when the light in your head starts to dim, try to catch the moment you fall asleep tonight. I dare you.